He said, yes, we're saving ourselves. You know, Napster are taking away a bit of money from us. But the bigger point here, which people failed to understand, and I think largely do still fail to understand, is that what he was talking about was artist rights. And the fact that if you're an artist and you create something, you should have control over that thing. It was about control, really. People didn't really understand that, and I think his reputation will never recover from the Napster fiasco.
By the end of 2001, Metallica were in trouble. The Napster case had cost them a lot of fans. Bassist Jason Newsted had left after 14 years, angry that James wouldn't let him play music with other bands.
I didn't want to step away from the thing. It wasn't like 100%, oh yeah, let's go, you know, like get out of here. It weren't like that. It's just something I had to make a decision as a man. You know, like what my line is. If somebody crosses that line, then I got to say stop, you know what I mean? That's what it came to.
It became clear that there were deep-seated issues in the band which needed solving, fast. Proof of this came when James entered rehab for alcoholism, effectively leaving the band for a year. When James returned, he was a new man. He learned that his family had to come before Metallica and that he didn't have to be James Hetfield, the rock star, all the time. With relationships much improved in the band, they turned towards the new album. Writing the songs as a collective for the first time, the band found a new aggression and purpose in the music.
It was a bit heavier and a bit faster than what had appeared before, certainly faster than anything that appeared in the 1990s. They'd rediscovered an element of what we call thrash metal. Lars was playing fast snare patterns once again, which hadn't done for a while. But this was true on a couple of songs. It wasn't the case throughout the album.
The original music's far more complex and stranger and much more original than the later records. They've become more of a rock band. In the 90s, it became more of a normal rock band. And St. Anger's an attempt to get out of that, you know.
The most notable thing about St. Anger, and certainly the thing that most people pick up on when they don't like it, is the sound. What Lars did was detune the snares on the side of his snare drum, which means that instead of getting a normal snare sound, you get a kind of boom noise when you hit it, and this is prevalent throughout the album. Now, a lot of people hated this and thought, why have you done this? Why have you gone back to sort of basic garage values? And it all ties in with the fact that Metallica wanted to rediscover some of their early spirit, so it makes sense. Bob used old microphones. He didn't bother tuning James's vocals. You can hear James hit the odd wrong note vocally. And all in all, the album sounded deliberately unsophisticated. This divided the fan base. Some people admired the fact that it was a deliberate hark back. Other people, like me, really couldn't stand it.
St. Anger, I mean, I can't believe Bob Rock did such a great job producing the other albums. Saying it's like the worst production job I've ever heard on any album. It's just, God, what is it? Like, people are calling it, you know, trash can drums. It's just really like you gotta be kidding me. And yeah, the album is faster and heavier and is an angry sounding album, but the songs just aren't that good, you know?
And by and large, the album just didn't have that quality that Metallica had been so insistent on it in their previous records, even on records which were relatively unsuccessful, like Load and Reload. At least you had some melodies, you had some catchy stuff, you had some heavy stuff as well, you had all the Metallica elements. On St. Anger, really, everything sounded very average.
With St. Anger in the can, Metallica concentrated on finding a new bass player.
When Metallica auditioned Jason's replacement, among the people they spoke to, there was Scott Reeder of the stoner rock Caius, who's an amazing player, but perhaps a little bit laid back and not technical enough for Metallica. There was Twiggy Ramirez, who had played with Marilyn Manson's band, a great player, but perhaps he didn't quite have the sort of ballsy energy that they required. And the man they ultimately recruited was Rob Trujillo, who had been in Suicidal Tendencies, and he had his own funk rock side project called Infectious Grooves. Now, what they were looking for in a bass player, I think, was someone who obviously was technically proficient enough to be able to handle it. And in fact, Lars said later of the other guys that he thought the songs were about 10% too difficult for their skills. But also someone who could push them. What James and Lars said about Rob when they recruited him was that he pushes us to achieve. Rob said himself that his ethos in life is to step up, or it's to take the next step. And when you watch the scene in Some Kind of Monster when Rob is playing his audition, he chose to play Battery, one of the toughest songs they do. You can see him standing there sort of nonchalantly knocking out this riff, while the other guys are sort of almost playing up to his standard, not the other way around.
Yeah! Power this stuff? I could try Battery. Battery? Yeah. You can play that fast with your fingers? Yeah! Battery! my bass sound you got going there?
Robert Trujillo, I always regard him as one of the best bass players I've ever seen.
Oh, he's an excellent bassist. You know, I met him when he was still in Suicidal Tendencies. A really nice guy too.
He's phenomenal. He's an incredible bass player. He is incredible. He was incredible. I remember seeing Slayer at Ruthie's Inn. He was just all over the place.
Robert Trujillo is a very talented bassist on stage. He's probably a better player technically than either Cliff Burton or Jason Newsted. But if anybody's going to make a difference to that band, they have to be an equal partner and not a hired hand. And Robert Trujillo is a hired hand for Metallica. He's hired to play bass, do it very, very well. Absolutely very well. He's a dynamo on stage. But is he going to make any difference where it really matters in the studio when it comes to writing new songs and taking a lead in terms of Metallica's direction? I don't think so.
With Robert Trujillo in the band, a new album to promote, and the issues built up over the decades melting away, Metallica went on tour. But surprise, surprise, not everybody liked the new album.
The reason why St. Anger sounded the way it did was because they had an agenda behind it. They weren't just putting out an album with some songs. What they wanted to do was strip back everything, all the baggage that had accumulated over the decades, and go back to the old style and just produce a raw blast of musical fury. Now, while that approach is to be applauded, and in fact they bigged it up hugely before the record was released. This is the heaviest album, this is the fastest, it's extreme, it's this, that, and the other. When it actually came out, everyone was ready for this, and there was this enormous disappointment because, in fact, it isn't that heavy, it isn't that fast, it isn't that exciting, it's not that powerful.
They've just lost sight of who they are, and are just kind of like, as people say, they're just kind of in this big loop, and I don't think they've really just kind of forgotten where they come from and what they were supposed to be.
The talent is still there, if the will is still there. Now, I feel that Lars and James are so far apart now, the only thing holding them together is the fact they're in the same band. And even then, they're not quite sure why they're in the same band. I think they need something radical. I think they need to shake up that band. And you know how I'd shake it up? I'd bring back Dave Mustaine. I think you put Mustaine back in that band with Hetfield, with Ulrich, and with whoever on bass. I get Newsted back. I think you actually have a great album in the making. But they need to shake things up because, to be honest, there's no connection between Lars Ulrich's traveling the world, hanging out with celebrities, buying art and following trendy music, and James Hetfield getting more and more into the redneck lifestyle, hunting, listening to country music, wearing cowboy boots. There's no connection between the two lifestyles anymore, and they come together and probably look at each other and say, who are you? Why are we sitting together? You put something like Mustaine into the mix as a catalyst, and I think then you have the real possibility of Metallica making another great album. And I'd like to see something of that radical nature happen.
It's one of those things where, you know, they've accomplished so much, you know, it's like, where do you go from here, you know? So now I think it's good, you know, it's important that they, like, you know, have fun with it, you know, have fun and just remember what it was about, you know. It's hard when you get older and you got, you know, your bank accounts are just like, you know, you can buy anything you want and you can do anything you want and go wherever you want. It's like, what do? You know, it's hard to stay hungry when you're in that kind of situation.
Perhaps Metallica will surprise us all with more amazing metal albums. Or perhaps they'll gracefully retire in a few years' time. But whatever happens, you can bet it'll be interesting. And very, very loud.
I think like you could be like the Rolling Stones with like 50.
Hey! Yeah. Interesting, man. I'm not a prophet. I'm horrible at planning things. I can't, you know, that's why I got a wife, I think. But I'm not a prophet. When it doesn't feel right anymore, we're done. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you very much.
Great.